I'm Jessie Draper, the Valley Girl.
Valley Girl.
Let's talk business.
I'm like the Valley Girl.
Does that feel good? I brought you a money ball. It's a great exfoliant.
Yeah.
This is just sugar. Rebecca, will you tell me a little bit about these?
Hi, Valley Girl TV.
High five. That's awesome. Five. The largest. High five for that.
Well, thank you.
I took, well, good job.
BuzzFeed is a leading social news organization featuring high-quality, original reporting and viral content. Their technology detects what's hot on the web and connects people with the content of the moment, ranging from silly cat videos to serious news. They currently have more than 25 million monthly unique visitors. Jon Steinberg is the president of BuzzFeed. Woohoo!
Valley Girl.
Let's talk business.
I'm like the Valley Girl.
Well, hey guys. So I am so excited to be here, and I'm excited to interview Jon from BuzzFeed. So it's actually BuzzFeed.
Buzz Media actually had to change their name to Spin because they were tired of competing with us.
Yes, because BuzzFeed is cooler just in general. So do you want to start with this clip? There was this great clip.
Yeah, sure. So the company's fairly new. We started out just a handful of years ago, and when I joined the company 3 years ago, we only had 6 million monthly visitors. We're actually up to about 50 million now. 25 is our ComScore US number on multi-platform. But this moment kind of happened at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
So this was just
This was Saturday night.
This was like this week.
And I think it speaks well to how much things have changed in media, and then also about how open we are to kind of being real about who we are in today's media landscape.
So tell the story. First, tell the story of what happened.
So we were supposed to have a table at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and this is the subject of some debate, but one of our reporters had some issue with the head of the White House Correspondents Association, and our table was revoked. So we got kind of...
So you weren't invited.
We were too much of a renegade
They
to
weren't
really be there.
invited to the party.
So we threw our own 700-person party during the White House Correspondents' Dinner in Washington on Saturday night, and they actually simulcasted our party on C-SPAN, and then we were able to watch C-SPAN as well, and we were all standing in the party when this happened.
Okay, so here's the clip. Now you're ready.
The problem is that the media landscape is changing so rapidly. You can't keep up with it. I remember when BuzzFeed was just something I did in college around 2 a.m. It's true.
So that was his response to you guys throwing your own party that you didn't invite the president
I think the president just likes BuzzFeed. I think that's what I think it is.
And who wouldn't?
Yeah.
So, okay, so you started a couple years ago. So for those out there who, aren't quite as familiar with BuzzFeed, which you should be because they have really cute, cuddly animals pretty regularly on BuzzFeed and fun cat videos, which I really love. But you also have kind of a balance of hard news.
Yep.
Will you give us kind of a quick overview?
Sure. So how many of you have been on BuzzFeed? All right, that's okay. I'll take it. We're penetrating Europe slowly.
And the rest
but surely.
of you are probably on your phone.
A few years ago, we were just a leading site for lighthearted internet culture, memes, and things of that sort, really kind of web-type content. And we recognized that more and more content was being disseminated on social, that in the Facebook news feed, you had your niece and a baby and an animal GIF, and then you had hard news, and it was all intermingled, and that's how millennials really liked getting their content. So we said that there's another type of content that spreads really well on the social web, and that's original reporting and scoops. So we hired Ben Smith from Politico to lead our politics coverage in the last election, and we broke McCain's endorsement of Romney and a bunch of other stories of that nature, and now we're up to 90 reporters that are fully staffed reporters at BuzzFeed that cover everything from technology to fashion and whatnot. We have an animals vertical as well, and we also create a lot of lighthearted things for like steps to restore your faith in humanity or how to make the ultimate PB&J sandwich. So it runs the gamut. It's what we call a Paris cafe of content.
So, yeah, I've heard you guys talk about this Paris cafe.
Yeah.
Explain that.
So the analogy is that if you're sitting in a cafe, it's a better place to read because you're social and you can talk about the content that you're consuming. You may have Sartre for your philosophy, you may have Le Monde for your world news, and there may be a puppy at the cafe, as there often are. It's okay to pet the puppy. Petting the puppy doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human.
Raise your hand if you would pet the puppy.
So that's our philosophy. Our philosophy is that it's okay to love animals, it's okay to love adorable content, and it doesn't make you any less serious about the hard news that's on the site.
I think that's fantastic. Now, but you originally started with primarily fun content, like the puppy content. So, I was curious, how do you find that balance? How do you, and there is definitely a notable focus on animals. So I have a few other questions about this, which is, do you have any animal activists on staff or PETA members?
We do.
And do you have a disclaimer that no animals were harmed in the creation of cute animal content? Because, that concerns me.
We're not actually, most of the animal stuff is found content that, bubbles up across the web on different social sites. So we're not really in the process of actually doing any kind of animal photo studio, although, I would never leave anything off the table. The balance really is that for millennials, there's always been this kind of composition of content in newspapers, right? The New York Times in the 1970s introduced the lifestyle section, the style section, the fine dining, museums. At the time, that was very controversial. For us, for millennials, which are a cohort that's struggling with employment, right? Has a culture all unto themselves, grew up web native, it would be ridiculous for them to have a fine dining section. That's just not something that would be applicable to them. So we do a distribution of content which matches up to the generation that's our audience. 60% of our audience is 18 to 34. Half of our audience accesses on mobile. So we're creating the right content for that time.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. So I really want to talk about advertising. You guys have changed the model for the blogging world, basically. And what has the response been to that? First, explain what you've done differently.
So we don't run any display advertising on BuzzFeed. We run only what we call story units, and we work only with brands that want to do social.
Display, you mean no banners?
No banners, no banners. Only that want to do social content-driven advertising. So on BuzzFeed, the unit is a story unit. It's yellow in stream. It looks like a promoted tweet or a sponsored story on Facebook. And we work with everybody from GE to Unilever to Samsung to create content that moves minds. It was interesting to see in Lewis's presentation, it was all about great, compelling content to show what Degree stood for, what Dove stood for. That's so much more engaging to an audience, especially an audience that's in their 20s and 30s. People hate banner ads. People have hated banner ads for 20 years. People don't debate for 20 years whether or not a product is good or bad. The iPad mini was a great product right away. We're not like debating for 20 years whether good things are good. So they're not effective. And people don't like them, and they're disruptive. And even now, with a lot of what you see going on in the exchanges, people can't even control the adjacency of these things. So I just take for granted now that social content is the way that people are going to advertise from a brand perspective in the future.
That's fantastic. And so it's this, so you call it native advertising, and you guys kind of coined that term.
I wouldn't say that we coined it. A lot of people really started talking about, the original native advertising is the Google-sponsored result. Maybe not the original, but certainly one that was well over a decade ago, and Facebook certainly had their sponsored stories before us, and Twitter as well. And in many ways, a television commercial is the native unit for television.
Right.
The idea that a banner pops up when you're trying to get to an article page, that's bizarre, right?
Yeah.
It's not like native advertising is the new thing.
That is so frustrating.
Yeah.
It's like, I just want...
Right, and people in your age cohort, are even more turned off by that than a normal person. So if you want to cultivate a site and you want to build your traffic on social, and social really is the cable network of our time, it really is the train tracks, you just can't do that stuff to your users.
That's fantastic. So how's it worked out for you?
It's been remarkable. I really think that we're about 2 years into being fully staffed. We were 15 people when I joined, and we're 240 people now. We have a whole ad sales force covering all the agencies, in the audience and a lot of the clients as well. And this past year was really a cascade. The roar from the clients and the agencies that they wanted to do this now, and that it was no longer a test type thing, but this was going to be a mainstay of their budget, was really impactful. Dan Roth from LinkedIn was up here yesterday saying that 30% of marketing budgets are now going to content creation. And I think that really says it all. The data's really kind of following this now.
So I have a question for you, because you guys have become this kind of mastermind of virality.
Yeah.
So if I want something to go viral, is it better to have like a celebrity tweet it, like Justin Bieber, perhaps?
No, that's really a misnomer. And
I'm a huge Bieber
if you
fan.
look at Paul Adams' book Grouped, which I think is really good. Paul was is at Facebook, or you look at Duncan Watt's book, who's one of our advisors and is a researcher at Microsoft. The idea of influencer theory, there's very little evidence to support that Lady Gaga tweets and everybody goes and does something. What's much more likely to occur is word of mouth online, which is people are exposed to content, some percentage sees that content and shares it within their small circle, and then that circle shares with another circle. So that's really what we're cultivating every day on BuzzFeed. And we find that on average, if we expose 10 people to a piece of branded content, that will result in 3 more people coming in as a result of sharing
And that's
activity.
just 10 regular whoever people.
Yeah, just we're going
on
with
Facebook
kind of we're going with sample sizes, and we're going with the law of averages, and we're basically have a portfolio approach to it. We're not banking it all on one video or that everybody happens to like Gaga this week and everyone's going to listen to Gaga, because that just doesn't happen in nature.
So that's just as effective, if not more effective, than Gaga or
Yeah,
Bieber.
I mean, let me give you another example.
Clearly, I'm partial to
No, let me
Bieber,
give you
you're
another
partial
example.
to
And this is
Gaga.
what I like. If I said to you, Jesse, there's a jar of jelly beans there, I can either get you like the world's jelly bean counting expert to come in and tell you how many jelly beans are in that jar, or we can have 100 people walk by the jar and each give their estimate, and then we can average it. Which would you want?
I mean, you didn't even give me the option to eat them.
Right. Well, so you eat a few, and then you got that choice.
I would probably have the world jelly bean expert.
Oh, you would?
I think I would.
Okay. All right. So that didn't go as well as I thought it was going to go. But I will tell you. But now I'll tell you the second part of it, though. The problem with that, though, is then the next week when you're doing peanuts and you've got peanuts in the jar, then you need to go find a peanut expert, even if that worked, right? Whereas if you just pass the same crowd by these different jars, on average, you're going to work out to get a good estimate.
Well, now that we're talking about peanuts, I would probably choose the other option.
Because you don't think there could be a peanut expert.
No, because I'm a really big fan of jelly beans.
Okay.
Okay, so you guys have a lot going on right now. You raised a round in January, but I heard that you've invested most of your income into the company as well. So you're just growing like at a crazy rate right now.
Right. I mean, the point was that we raised 2 rounds back to back. We raised one in December of, we're in 2013 now, is that right?
Yeah.
We raised one in
I think
December of
so.
2012 and then one in December of 2011. Most of the capital from 2011 was still there because we had been, we'd been making enough money to kind of cover our bills, so to speak. But we are investing aggressively now. We're investing in video. We had no YouTube presence 5 months ago. This month we'll do 30 million YouTube views. We've got a guy named Zay Frank, who's one of the original web video stars, who's doing all of our web video efforts. We're opening a big studio in LA. We just crossed the pond and opened up an office in London that's doing quite well. We've got 5 writers there, so BuzzFeed UK is up and roaring along. And I would say in the year ahead, what we're really looking at doing is pushing even more heavily into mobile and having some new formats for that, video as well, and continuing to try to come up with advertising formats that are native and enjoyable and shareable, because the space is getting competitive and we always want to kind of stay ahead.
So let's talk about mobile really quick.
Yeah.
How many of your users are on mobile, like view your content
Right.
through mobile?
So well over 50% of our unique visitors come in through mobile each month. And what I like to say is that if you have a mobile strategy, you kind of don't get it, because that's an understatement of where you need to be. Mobile really needs to be almost the only thing that you care about. Carolyn Everson from Facebook was up here yesterday, and she said they consider themselves a mobile company, and that if you come into Zuck's conference room with a computer, he doesn't want to see the computer demo, he wants to see the mobile demo. I think we feel much the same way, and social really is mobile, because so much of the consumption happens on devices now, and people are in Facebook, and we get so much of our traffic from Facebook and Twitter. If you're not optimized for that mobile browser that spawns when someone clicks a link on Facebook or Twitter, you're really adrift.
Okay, I'd like to go back a little bit to native advertising again. Will you share with us just your favorite campaign that you've done?
Yeah, I think I have. My favorite ones would be the ones where we're working on an always-on basis with a client that's effectively doing newsroom publishing with us. And the 2 that I think about most frequently are what we're doing with GE around invention and around clean energy and things of that sort, around GE Eco-Imagination, and around Virgin Mobile. I mean, for Virgin Mobile, what's been really powerful is that, for example, when Instagram came to Android, all of their phones are Android, and they've tried to convey that they are a carrier with high-quality phones and prepaid plans, and they give you unlimited data, but only the amount of minutes that you need. That's ideal. That's ideal for young people, because that's basically exactly what they want. They did a whole post around 20 things no one wants to see on Instagram. No one wants to see your selfies. No one wants to see pictures of your food. that post did remarkably.
Selfie, this is like a new term.
Yeah.
It's like you take a picture of yourself. I didn't know there was a name for it.
See, I mean, but what's interesting is this is how much this stuff changes now, right? Which is, if you get above, I mean, and I don't mean to suggest your age or anything, but you get a little bit towards the end of any of these cohorts, and you realize that if you're not being very attentive to like each of these little trends, like someone could do a whole marketing campaign around selfies right now. We try to think about that stuff because that is so applicable to people in their 20s. Everybody's taking selfies. People take selfies of themselves to see what outfits they're in, to send their friends to see if that's what they should wear or not. But anyway, we did this campaign with Virgin Mobile, things you don't want to see on Instagram. It got 300,000 views in I think like 15 or 20 days. And then we did a survey methodology to prove that this had gotten hundreds of % lift in terms of people interest in switching to Virgin Mobile as a result of being exposed to this content. Great content works to move minds.
That's amazing. You guys, it sounds like everyone there is just so incredibly creative. Like, you're thinking about the selfies, you're thinking about all of these things. How are the old media, like New York Times type media, how are they responding to you?
Occasionally we see something that, we see someone dip their toes a little bit, someone kind of roll out their own kind of BuzzFeed type looking thing. But I think it's challenging to kind of cultivate one group and at the same time go into another group. I do think there are different sections that the traditional media needs to do to really cultivate this generation. I think a lot really isn't applicable to that. And I don't see them moving particularly well to build great businesses, because ultimately the banners are not a great business online. That's why these traditional media companies are having quarter over quarter of bad digital earnings. And within the next 2 years, I think almost every one of these publishers will move into some kind of native advertising. In fact, Yahoo announced yesterday that they're doing their own native unit. So the content doesn't seem quite right for the time that we're at, and the advertising is certainly not what it needs to be.
So what do we have to look forward to? I know you touched upon this, but what are you just the most excited that you guys are working on?
Well, I can't tell you what I'm most excited about.
Well, you should tell us that part.
No,
that thought you just had sounds the most interesting.
Well, I'll give you a hint.
Wouldn't you guys agree?
I'll give you a hint. We're not obsessed about everything we do being on BuzzFeed.com. So that sort of opens, we think the content can flow anywhere and be consumed anywhere. So BuzzFeed, our video strategy is on YouTube. Like it doesn't need to live on BuzzFeed. And we're going to be rolling out some other things of that nature that won't necessarily live on BuzzFeed, but will be BuzzFeed media and BuzzFeed properties. And will be new and interesting ways to consume the hottest, most shared content from around the web, with a heavy focus on mobile. So that's adequately vague. I'm also really excited about our business vertical. We hired Peter Loria from Reuters. BuzzFeed will be covering business in a very BuzzFeed way. So you can look forward to 20 CEOs saying synergy followed by their stock charts collapsing, things of that sort. And that should be out by May 20th.
Fantastic. Okay, I would like you to leave everybody with one piece of advice for someone who's looking to get into the new age advertising world before we open it up for questions.
Well, I would say that if you're a brand or an agency, which is the bulk of the audience, the most important thing is to really keep the lawyers, constrained, or at least kind of bound by a set of rules and processes. Because any lawyer, when it comes to approving content and creating content in an agile fashion, is just going to say no.
Right.
Because why wouldn't they say no? You say no, there's no risk. This stuff definitely has risks, although I will say that the number of incidents I think we've had where there was some problem associated to content is probably maybe a handful out of the 300 campaigns we did last year. We haven't had any issues this year.
300
Yeah,
campaigns?
we'll do 500 to 600 campaigns this year. We have an 80% renewal rate.
Amazing.
Yeah, but make sure that the lawyers know they can set guidelines, a playbook, as it were.
Right.
We don't want celebrities in our branded content. We don't want to be adjacent to this kind of content. This is what we do and do not want. And then you go into it, and at least you can go back to them when you're trying to get content approved in a fast fashion. You can kind of hold them to the commitments that they made, as opposed to going to them and saying, "Is this okay?" They're going to say, "No, it's not okay."
Have you had many legal troubles as far as, sorry, I feel like that's a personal question, so share as much as you feel comfortable with. But legal troubles as far as the content?
No, I mean, not really. It's typically not that kind of thing. It's typically, there's something in a post that, and some world event happens that
Right.
makes something seem insensitive that's in a post that we have to remove, or somebody doesn't like a particular celebrity that's in a post and thinks that could be a problem, and then we take it down. And it's typically not the people in the organization that worked on the campaign. It's just these things get huge exposure. People see them all
Right.
over the place. Like I'm sure that in the campaigns that were up there, I'm sure there were some people, from Unilever who saw these campaigns do terrifically, and someone was like, oh, I think that in the scene with the guy where he's proclaiming his love, there's something inappropriate about that.
Right.
When somebody does really well in your organization, there's a lot of people that take credit, and then there's a lot of people that inevitably say, why do we do this? This is, we shouldn't have done this.
Well, I think
That's the downside of having a successful campaign, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, successful campaigns, there isn't really a downside of a successful campaign,
Exactly
right? Right. Okay. I think we should open it up to questions, and I would love for you to share something about yourself. I'm going to share something about Jon before, so every time you stand up to ask a question, you have to share something about yourself before you ask the question. Jon actually has a cat named after the guy who's credited for inventing the internet.
Well, the philosophy behind the internet, Vannevar Bush came up with the Memex, which was this kind of conceptual precursor to what became the internet. And my cat's name is Vannevar.
And little did you know, you would work at a company that has a lot of cat stuff going on.
I know. It was amazing that I was into the internet and I wanted a cat, and who would have, the cat's now, 16 or 17 years old, so I could not have known that my life would have collided with cats and internet in two different locations.
Yes, I
Yeah.
think that's hilarious. Who else has a cat? Okay, who has a question for Jon? And I know you do, and also I'm like kind of intense about questions, so if no one raises their hand, I call on you. So you're all in the hot seat right now, because I encourage participation. No one has a, I see you right here, right in front of me. You've been very in tune with this. Yes, this guy right here. Want to ask a question for Jon? I'm sure you have one.
How do I get on BuzzFeed?
So it's interesting that you asked that. The question is, how do you get on BuzzFeed? Are you an advertiser or just a person who has to?
Share something about yourself.
If you're a publisher, we actually have 300 million UVs of publisher partners, Time, Us Weekly, Huffington Post, where we give them our analytics so they can see which of their stories are going viral, and we trigger direct links to their most viral stories onto our homepage, so we can do that. If you want to contribute, we just actually refreshed our contributor platform, so you're able to post your own stuff. And if you are a brand or an agency, we have contacts into all of your organizations, but if you just email me, I'll make sure we get you to the right person, Jon at BuzzFeed, no H.
Sounds great, thanks.
Yeah, you got it.
He just got a lot out of that question, so, okay.
So my question, where are you getting your journalists from? Are they coming, oh, sorry, hello. Where are you getting your journalists from? Who are you attracting, and where are they, where do they used to work?
Yeah, it's the widest range. It's a lot out of traditional media companies where the person did a digital role. So we just hired, our breaking news editor comes from the New York Times. We just hired her. Peter, as I mentioned, comes from Reuters. Ben came from Politico. Dory, who's one of our managing editors, came from, Dory was at Rolling Stone. So it's typically people that are writers who are very successful in doing social and writing for the social web and getting their content shared. That want to come over and do this. And working at BuzzFeed it's a different kind of a thing. It's a different publishing schedule. I think for a lot of these writers, it's a way to get out of the bureaucracy of an organization that might have been slowing them down. We certainly have editorial oversight and fact checking and all of that, but we don't kind of belabor things to the extent that a lot of the traditional media does. So a lot of people out of those fields.
Can I ask another one?
Yeah.
Do you think long form content is dying then?
We have a whole long form section. Did you know that or no?
Yes.
Okay.
They're great art, they're fantastic articles.
The long form section is doing remarkably well. I'll tell you some interesting stats about it. There is a massive drop off in the end. Most people do not make it to the end of a 6,000 or 8,000 word article. But what is intriguing is how many people make it to the middle or make it 3/4 through. And we've really integrated the read it later services like Pocket and Instapaper so that people can take these articles with them on the go. And we're excited about it when we're fully committed to it. the audience that you get from one of those articles is a very distinct audience, and even if it's in smaller numbers, we can certainly monetize that with the brands that want to be adjacent to people that are deeply interested in topics. So we're excited about it. Buzz reads, we call it. Yeah.
Back here. BuzzRead.
Buzz reads is the long form.
Hey, other than how BuzzFeed do native advertising, is there any other kind of new native advertising formats that you've seen recently that you think are cool or very effective?
I really like the YouTube TrueView format. I think that most people would. I think that many people would say that Google has the best advertising product in the history of the world, and that's not really an overstatement. You know, Google puts an ad for something that you asked for in front of you at the moment you're asking for it. So YouTube is, from a brand advertising perspective, the idea that they do a pre-roll that then has to be good enough that you won't skip it in the first 5 seconds is pretty miraculous to me. And the rates that people are paying for those right now, I think, are dirt cheap compared to what, when you compare it to television. So I'm a huge fan of that product. And the Facebook social advertising products, to me, are excellent as well. I like the Twitter products. I think they're too expensive for what they are, but I think they're excellent as well. It's very hard to do a brand campaign with a real ROI on Twitter right now, just given how expensive the units are. But Facebook is sort of, the prices are there. I mean, you can get great CPC interactions, 10 cents, 15 cents, 20 cents on a social piece of content.
It's fantastic. Any ladies? Okay, well, I have a question for you. You have a son.
Yes,
right?
Cooper.
Cooper, how do you balance all of this? How are you doing all of this? You're running this huge company.
Yep.
That's growing. Like, how many people do you have right now?
We have 240 people now.
240 people in New York City.
Yep.
And how are you? What are your kind of like tips for balancing?
Yeah, what's interesting to me is a lot of people I meet say that they want to do strategy, right? They want to work on strategy. I don't really know what strategy, I don't know exactly how you do strategy. You just sit at your desk and do strategy. So for me, I get some. I mean, obviously I'm engaged with my family when I'm with my family, but I find that when you have that kind of freedom and you're sort of loose and let your mind roam while you're playing with your kids, you're taking a walk in the park or something like that, that really is inevitably when the best ideas come to you for how to fix something in your company or how to resolve some issue or to come up with some kind of new product. So I think it's essential that you have those moments in your life where when you're engaged with your family and your kids, A, because you love your kids and you want to do that and they need it, and B, putting down the device in some ways opens up your thinking and your kind of brainstorming to stuff that otherwise wouldn't happen.
That's fantastic. I mean, it's really impressive to see you running this company and balancing a family. It's like, I mean, I know, because especially with content, you have to be putting out stuff all the time.
Right.
I mean, it just never, do you ever sleep?
Well, I'm not really on the editorial side. Ben really leads that up. So it's not so much that as it is kind of the campaigns need to constantly go live. The campaigns need to get stuff approved for the clients. And we have, we've got a very deep bench at the company right now. We've got a lot of great people in varying roles that can kind of, so that nobody has to kind of be there 24 hours a day. I mean, we're effectively with Europe now, we're online. I guess that puts us online about 18 hours a day, right? Because with the 6-hour overlap, we can handle just about anything. And then soon we're going to go to 20. We have a night editor in New York who kind of stays up all night. But we're looking to kind of do even more international expansion because we want to have even more coverage for both the ad stuff and for the editorial stuff as well.
How many countries are you in now?
Right now we are only, I mean, it depends, you count LA as another country. Well, no, just London and New York right now. London,
Okay.
New York, and we've got salespeople throughout the United States, and I think we'll move pretty quickly to expand, further throughout Europe, and then in Asia at some point.
Okay.
Probably not Asia this year.
But you certainly have traffic all over the world.
Yeah, about 70% of our unique visitors are in the U.S., and about 30% of our unique visitors are outside the U.S. With Europe being the second largest area of traffic after the U.S.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. When you started working at BuzzFeed, did you ever see it scaling as big as you guys have become?
Yeah, it's hard. It's actually hard to think about. Jonah Peretti, who's my partner, got a good piece of advice from Ken Laird. Ken was the chairman of the Huffington Post, and Ken said, you can never think about something that's too far off how you're going to get to there. Because if you think about how am I going to get to doing millions of dollars a month in revenue when you're doing no revenue, it almost kind of just bums you out because it seems so impossible. So back when we had no revenue, I thought to myself, well, oh my God, we got to do $50,000 a month this month in revenue. And you kind of think yourself towards that goal, and then when you get that, that becomes your new minimum. And then at certain points you have jumps, right? Otherwise you never really get anywhere. But I actually think that if you spend too much time thinking long term, that can be very short-sighted.
How far ahead as a company do you guys project?
I think that we think in 6-month increments. I think that we think our long-term planning is, I mean, we have aspirations. I mean, we'd like to be the next New York Times. We'd like to be the next Condé Nast or Hearst. That's certainly what we're going towards. But we think in terms of what are the major things that we want to nail in the next 6 months. In terms of the ad products, in terms of the mobile product, in terms of the new verticals that we want to cover. And that's kind of how we do our planning cycles.
That's fantastic. That's
and then we
really
do the Google.
impressive.
I mean, then we do the Google OKR system, so everybody's on OKR, objective key results, which I
Right.
took from Google, which I always liked. So everybody on a quarterly basis, we kind of line up objectives against the overall objectives of the company. A lot of these things that can seem a bit rigid when you're there, you realize afterwards kind of how helpful they can be in making sure that everybody's progressing towards that same goal.
Something else that's really interesting about you guys is you've built everything in
Yes.
your company.
Yeah, we're
like,
the Apple of
by
this stuff.
hand.
Yeah.
You just
But that's
every
why a lot of
brick.
websites don't work well. A lot of websites are these Frankenstein type things where the stats come from one person and the related content unit comes from another person and the ad product is from somebody else. We build our own technology. We love our own technology. We don't put other people's random stuff on our site, and that lets the site load incredibly fast. It gives us an incredibly adaptive mobile web design, so every page formats perfectly. It allows us to give our advertisers the same publishing system, the same stats that we have, so fair is fair. And it allows us to move a lot more quickly. So yeah, so we view that Apple is the parallel of the technology view that we have, as opposed to a lot of what you see out there in the publishing universe.
Yeah, definitely. That's I love the Frankenstein analogy.
Yeah, and we try to keep the company balanced between a third business, which is all the people that work on sales and client support, and we've got a separate team that does creative just for brands, that's walled off from editorial for reasons of church and state. But a third of the company is technology, and a third of the company is editorial. And we've maintained those ratios.
That's amazing. Well, do we have any last questions for John? Oh,
I do have another question.
Good.
John, how do you price your campaigns? And then how do you calculate the ROI or the PR value?
Yep.
oh, that's a good question.
So the question is, how do we price and calculate the ROI on our campaigns? We actually use a three-stage approach. The first is we price at a CPM, or we do have some CPC units. We price at a CPM that's competitive with your typical premium publisher. We typically try to get it under $9 US, blended across the whole media plan. The click-through rates on our unit, as measured by DoubleClick, tend to be 1% to 2%. So our units click 10 to 20 times better than a banner, and you're paying the same price for a banner. Then we allow you, through a live dashboard, to see all the traffic going to your content and all the earned media, all the social views that go to your content. And finally, we do these brand lift studies with Nielsen, where we look at the pool of people that don't see the content and ask them a question about the product or service, the people that see the content through paid, and then finally the people who arrive at the content through clicking a link from their friend on Facebook or Twitter. So it's pretty hard at any of those three stages. A media buyer can be pretty comfortable that they're getting an outperforming product at the market price.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions. And this is your moment. This is your moment to ask John. You have this great guy up here.
Oh, that's so nice. Or I'll just be getting a drink outside and they can ask me questions there.
Okay, so I would love to ask you, actually, I told you about this in the hallway, but to end upon.
Yes.
Okay, so tell me this funny story about having one of your employees make so someone had a job interview.
Yes.
And they had to make a PB&J?
I think they had to describe how they would make a PB&J in a post format. And I think that the task was to try to figure out how they could think outside the box and come up with something that was fairly mundane. This was an editorial interview question. Take something fairly mundane and making it interesting, compelling, and shareable. And when our interns, people apply for our internship program, which gets an enormous amount of applicants, we typically have them do sample posts as well. So for us, we're always looking for people that can think outside the box, and it's sometimes these most kind of typical type things that people can come up with a very kind of shareable angle on, and that's why we do that question.
That's fantastic.
Cool.
I don't know how to make PB&J in a creative way.
you slice the crust.
Slice the crust? Oh, that's a good idea. Well, can everyone give Jon a round of applause?
Thank you.
What a fantastic guy.